There we go.
What kind of bamboo is it that you planted on 25 acres?
It's hennin, yeah. And I'll definitely be talking more about that, but the hen that National Bamboo has settled on as our primary tissue culture plant starts is it's tissue culture. So we're able to scale it up really fast, really efficiently, and everything's cloned. So it's all identical for the most part, and abiotic factors aside, but and it's also been treated. So all the hennin flowering right now, these tissue culture plants are not flowering, and the oldest ones are 4 years old. They're also doing great, even though the mother that it came from at, I think it was the NC Arboretum, flowered and died. So that's proof to me, and we anticipate, speaking with experts in the field about tissue culture, that it should have reset the flowering cycle. So we believe it'll be good for 80 to 100 years. So, all right. All right. Hello.
Sweet. Thank you.
All right. Check. Checking 1, 2. What happened? Oh, is it? Hello? It's like cutting in and out though. Great. Yeah. Let's just go back to what it was.
No.
Sorry, buddy.
Shorten this one.
Okay. Boom. All right. Hello. There we go. Okay, so harnessing nature's allies. This is something I'm very passionate about. And microbial insights optimizing bamboo farming. All right, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So here's the key takeaways. Uh-oh, that's not gonna work. All right, hopefully we're good. So the key takeaways here. So regenerative biological farming, that's what I'm calling it. It's not a new thing, but it might be new for folks. It's similar to organic. However, organic is within the framework of conventional farming. Regenerative biologic is outside of that framework. It's going beyond. And it's very important. I really want to hit home on the fact that we have 40 years of soil left. That is a scientific fact. It's a consensus. And that's the idea that topsoil, where all of the microbes mostly are living, they can go pretty deep, but they're mostly in the topsoil. And that topsoil is a limited resource that we are essentially mining with conventional farming, and if not totally destroying. So at the current rate of degradation with tilling and the use of synthetics, chemicals, fertilizers, herbicides, which they say are safe, but they're actually not. And don't shoot me for saying that, but it's just true. We have to preserve our biosphere, and we're not on track to do that. So 40 years left of topsoil. The future of farming is definitely biological. And you're even seeing that with these big chemical companies that sell fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. They are switching. The fastest growing market is in biologics. So we'll talk more about that. So, go back for 1 second, sorry. So in a teaspoon of soil, of living soil, not dirt, difference. Teaspoon of living soil, you have more microbes than people on Earth. It's crazy to think that, but it's true. So when we're looking at remediating soil, the holy grail is a 1-to-1 fungal to bacterial biomass ratio. That's the biomass, not the individual organisms, but the biomass. And this is something we'll talk about more as well. So biological, it seems scary. It seems it is complex, but it's something that we can just trust is happening. And there are ways to monitor it, but it's easy and it does cost less. Bamboo farming. So we are talking specifically about how to harness microbes for bamboo farming, how to use the biologics to supercharge our growth. So we're going to talk about all of this and also how to address an unhealthy grove and what's going on there. All right, so 52% of agricultural soils are already degraded. That's scary. That's really scary. This was the hemp farm right here that I worked on, and the soil was dead because they had been growing corn for years and not rotating crops, no cover crops, just adding tons of salt-based fertilizers every year and tilling it up and creating compaction. And these are all things that are exacerbating the problem, but they're short-term solutions. You can grow that crop, you can grow your corn, but then you got to keep adding to it. And in a natural biological regenerative system, we don't have to continually add. The microbes are doing the work. So savesoil.org, everyone should check that out. It's a global movement happening, started by Sadhguru, and it is all about preserving soil. And so we have taken the pledge as a company, and I would encourage everyone to check it out. There's a lot of free resources like this meme you can share. So, all right, so here's the soil food web, and Dr. Elaine Ingham is considered to be one of the world premier microbiologists. Part of her story is crazy. She was University of Oregon, and she was working. She wrote a book on plant pathology for the USDA. She's the author of that, and she was consulting with a lab that was genetically modifying bacteria to help farmers. It was going to help farmers decompose or ferment their crop residue, agricultural waste, and turn it into alcohol that they could use. And she said, "Ooh, don't do that. Watch out." Sure enough, the bacteria started mutating or something like that, and jumped out, and it had the potential to essentially kill plants that were living, not just dead plant material, but actually kill living plants. So it could have just escaped and burned up, entire, ecosystems. So thankfully, it was already getting ready to be launched. It was FDA approved or USDA approved, and they were getting ready to launch this and trial it in the field. Thankfully, she caught that problem. They didn't do it, but they are genetically modifying microbes right now. It's kind of scary, but maybe there's positives to it. Maybe there's negatives to it. We'll see what happens, how it plays out. But we really need people to jump on board this regenerative movement. It's a movement that's truly happening, and there's a lot of really good evidence. So Dr. Elaine created the Soil Food Web School. I'm actually a student of the Soil Food Web School right now. I'm a certified lab tech, and so I can assess the microbiology in soils, composts, and we have a software program that helps to, we use shadow microscopy, and we enter our data into a software program that calculates all of the biomass and the, with standard deviations, and so we're able to get a really good picture of what's going on in the soil. And these are what we're looking at. We're looking at the organic matter, the fungi, the bacteria, the nematodes, which are like little earthworms, protozoa. A lot of people have heard of root knot nematodes, and that's like maybe all you've ever heard about them. That's only one type of nematode. The rest are beneficial. There's bacterial feeders, they're fungal feeders, and they're all helping cycle nutrients in the soil like earthworms do. They're mining through the soil, they're tilling the soil, so they're providing ecosystem services, and the poop is the soluble nutrients. So all of these organisms, from the fungi and bacteria to the arthropods and the microarthropods and the nematodes, they're all cycling nutrients, and there's actually enough nutrients. This is what we're taught in the school. There's enough nutrients in any type of agricultural soil. It's just locked up in silica crystalline structures, and it has to be unlocked, starting with bacteria. Most agricultural soil just has bacteria in it because we've tilled it so much and we've added so much synthetic salts. And these salts are literally exploding the organisms because of the concentration gradient. The salts pulling the cytoplasm or the water right out of their bodies and exploding them. So or the tilling is totally destroying fungal networks that have, been developing for years. And so yeah, Soil Food Web School is incredible. Dr. Elaine is an incredible woman with a lot of knowledge. I first saw her speak about 10 years ago, and now I'm really happy to be a part of that program. So yeah, let's go on to the next slide. So we cannot farm bamboo without microbes. Bamboo is a very ancient, primitive plant. It has not been selectively bred in the way that a lot of agricultural crops have. I think there's like over 100 different microbes that associate with bamboo, and I'll talk to you about how they do that. So, but starting with the bamboo shoot, why do bamboo shoots not last very long? Because they're full of bacteria. They're full of species of bacteria. And in fact, those bacteria are helping to give the bamboo nitrogen so that that bamboo shoot can grow so fast. So they do this in a really incredible way. Microbes are actually 70% of the biomass on Earth. And in our own bodies, we're only 10% human. It's crazy. So it's similar. Animals, plants, we're all part of this biosphere. We're all holobionts, which is an interesting term, meaning that we are a superorganism, a host. And it's not gross. It's not like there's a bunch of germs on us. We have to get past that. That was an idea propagated by germ theory. We're well beyond that now. So, we need to move away from the sanitization mindset into a mindset of harnessing or teaming up with this biology. So microbes influence health and plant growth. They do for humans too. It's the same bacteria, fungi, and everything that are growing plants that are actually helping our immune systems when we eat food. So if we're sanitizing all of our food, we're sanitizing our bodies as well. We're not getting the microbes that we need to partner with as well. But all these bacteria, they actually help the bamboo grow. And a really interesting concept that is so mind-blowing is that plants are actually farming the microbes the way that we farm plants. They release exudates into the soil. Plants will alter the pH of the soil. You don't have to alter your pH. Plants will do it. But listen, chemical, conventional methods are not compatible with regenerative methods. You cannot do the practices that you do with conventional farming, if you're gonna go this route. So fungicides, insecticides, and really what we're asking everyone to do is stop altogether using chemicals. So and that's the first step, and it's scary, but it's doable, I promise, because there's a lot of people that have done it and they're more successful, they're more profitable. All right, so this is a really complex image here, but what I want you to, I put it up there because I want you to see this is kind of what the DNA genomics are looking at, DNA sequencing of microbes and classifying them and mapping them. So this was actually a study looking at the rhizosphere. The rhizosphere is, the roots, the area around the roots of plants. You have the phyllosphere, the above ground biomass you can see in that picture. But this image is looking at the bacteria and fungi that were affected by chromium contamination. So the idea that they're using bamboo to remediate soil that was contaminated with chromium, and they were looking at how the bacteria and fungi changed because of that heavy metal. But that's kind of beside the point. I really like this image because I wanted to show you kind of what that looks like when they're mapping the microbes, and also it's a good picture, depicting the phyllosphere and the rhizosphere. So all those bacteria on the right side and fungi on the right side, each color representing a different species. You can see how it changed. On the right was after the chromium. And the endophytes and endosymbionts, this term is a term for what we were talking about earlier, where the microbes are living inside the tissues of plants. So they're fully integrated into the root systems and the leaf and branches and culms. It's all integrated into that tissue very, very deeply. And so an endophyte is just a general term for these organisms that live in and among us. And the endosymbionts are going to be a term for the ones that are beneficial to us. So one of the big ones is nitrogen. Nitrogen is so important, right? NPK, those soluble nutrients, the macronutrients that we need to grow plants, the fertilizers that that we're told to put out on our field, the most important ones. So nitrogen, super important for all kinds of plant physiology, plant protein synthesis, right? Chlorophyll, that's what makes chlorophyll green, is the nitrogen. And stem and leaf growth, the shoot production. If we're told when we're growing bamboo, throw nitrogen out in the spring. So nitrogen fixing bacteria are integrated with bamboo. And when I first learned about nitrogen fixing bacteria, all I really heard was about the root nodules on legumes like clover and peas. And that's a good place to start, right? Cover crops for bamboo that could fix nitrogen. You put clover out, white dwarf clover or red clover. And I really like the white dwarf. That's a good one because it's so low growing. But they're literally drawing nitrogen out of the air. The plants are associating with the microbes. The microbes are signaling them to say, I need some nitrogen, and then they're storing it in these nodules on the root systems. Well, bamboo is not associating necessarily with the root nodule forming nitrogen fixers, but it turns out there's a lot of other nitrogen fixing bacteria. In fact, we just started to break out in a new science showing how other microbes that we didn't realize are doing it. So it turns out a lot of nitrogen is being fixed by all of these different consortiums of microbes. And we need that nitrogen. So bamboo can be grown without nitrogen fertilizer 100%. I have proof of it. And there's plenty of other case studies where people are doing that as well. And it's not, it's not going to run off and cause algal blooms in our rivers, and which is what's currently happening. We have all kinds of nitrogen runoff pollution because people are just throwing this, fertilizer out because they're being told to, and maybe they're not necessarily understanding how or what's happening. So it's accidental, sure, but it's happening, and it's pollution. So here's another look at the nitrogen fixers, proteobacteria. That's what they look like. One type, there's Bacillus licheniformis right there on the top right, and a Bradyrhizobium. These are all different images of these nitrogen fixers, and then another image of the rhizosphere and the diversity of microbes that are down there in the roots. That's kind of what it looks like, if you could imagine it. Obviously, they're microscopic, so this would be like a very fine root hair at 400 or maybe 1000x. And nitrogen fixing bacteria live in and on the bamboo in the leaves. They're free living, and they live. So here's some examples too on the right. Actino, we'll talk about that one in a second. That one's really cool. And yeah, so these free living nitrogen fixers on the leaves, and then also down in the roots. It's all over the bamboo. But if it's not there to begin with, because of the condition of your soil, or even just the way that like tissue culture bamboo needs to be re-inoculated, because when they tissue culture bamboo, they have to sanitize the tissue. So we have to re-inoculate. And in a lot of cases, like we saw earlier, 52% of soils are degraded. These microbes are disappearing. There's like 500 new chemicals out there that are being used in agriculture, and they have negative effects. They're just not looking at those negative effects for, you could probably guess the reasons. So reducing synthetic fertilizer dependency is huge. That's how we become more profitable with regenerative farming. It's one of the main reasons, because we don't have the input costs after your initial input. So yeah, inoculating bamboo plantlets, there's science showing that it actually works. And I will talk about how we can do that. So Actinobacteria, I guess there isn't a really good picture of what that looks like, but formerly actinomycetes, they thought they were fungi. They thought these bacteria were fungi. It's like 30% of the bacteria in our soil are actinobacteria. And they look like these long strands of hair when you're looking at them under the microscope. They're kind of hard to see, but it's very significant. Brassicas like broccoli, they love actino. So if you have high actino in your soil, you're going to have a really good broccoli crop or Brussels sprout crop. And but actino associate with pretty much every plant. We don't want a whole lot of it. We don't want to overload that. Any one thing is not going to be good. We're talking about diversity here, but actino, recent science has shown some really incredible things that actino do. So in chlorophyll production, increasing shoots, the weight of shoots, and phosphate, that's another one of those big, the macronutrients, phosphorus, that we are mining for fertilizer. That's not sustainable, and it will run out. It's a limited resource. So, and not to mention that phosphate added to the soil is going to prevent it will prevent microbial association. So when we're back to that topic of, it's not compatible with conventional methods. If you're using phosphate, then you're not going to be encouraging your plants. They get lazy. It's like feeding them sugar water. They get lazy and they don't want to even associate with the mycorrhizal fungi or the actinobacteria that are going to be actually mobilizing and solubilizing phosphorus. So yeah, all of these incredible things, potassium, calcium, enzyme production, it's incredible. Actino are truly very interesting. So here's the Mycorrhizae. This is one of those organisms that when I first got into this stuff, it was very hard to visualize, because we think fungi and we think the mushrooms out there that we see. The mushroom is just the fruiting body, and not every fungi produces a visible mushroom fruiting body. Mycorrhizae are one of them. Well, so there are ectomycorrhizae fungi that produce fruiting bodies, and ectomycorrhizae fungi, they associate with 80% of land plants. So there is a theory. I mean, this goes back 450 million years, I think. It's ancient. It's an ancient association that evolved, where the first land plants started to associate with the fungi. And ectomycorrhizae pretty much are responsible for the phosphorus solubilization and all kinds of other cycles, carbon cycle. They're even hypothesizing some of the nitrogen fixation could be from mycorrhizae. That's not necessarily proven yet. Yeah, they transport nutrients, and this is how they're connecting to the root system. So on the right, that's arbuscular mycorrhizae. See the arbuscules that look like little trees? Those are actually inside of the cells of the root tip. And that's why they call them endomycorrhizae, meaning internal. So that's 10% of plants, 10% of mostly conifers. So if you go into a conifer forest, that has the highest fungal levels of any soil. And so when we're talking about that 1-to-1 bacterial-fungi ratio that I mentioned earlier, in a conifer forest, you want higher fungi. You want more like a 5 or even upwards of 500 fungi biomass to bacterial biomass. And bamboo associates with endomycorrhizal fungi. There is research on that. So Ectomycorrhizae, the Amanita destroying angel, what a fascinating one. It's one of the most deadly fungi on Earth. And I have found them in a bamboo grove. So I know they're there without a doubt. And I've also confirmed that with other research that has shown it. So yeah, on the left, you have the endomycorrhizal fungi like the Amanita. They create a net, and it's not in the cells like the arbuscules are, but it's in between them and kind of shielding. So imagine some disease trying to get to that root tip. It's not going to get to it because that fungi is protecting it like a sheath. But if you're using phosphorus fertilizer, you don't have that. So your plants are more susceptible to disease, 100%. And the ectomycorrhizal fungi, they create a much wider, further reach into the soil where they can grab water. And what's happening, it's like a trade, it's like a commerce going on. You have the plants pulling carbon out of the atmosphere when they're photosynthesizing and fixing that into carbohydrates in the form of sugars and root exudates, where they're actually pushing those carbohydrates out and feeding the fungi in exchange for phosphorus or water or other nutrients. So that's how that's working. It's like a trade system, and the bamboo is in charge. So here is another type of fungi called saprophytes, and saprophytes are decomposers. And so bamboo loses its leaves, the leaves fall down, and the dead culms, and they all need to be degraded and broken down, because if we didn't have decomposer fungi, we would have tons of biomass, just building up on Earth, and that's not a system that would work. So these fungi are really important as well. They break down dead plant material, and then they release those nutrients back into the soil in the form of soluble nutrients that the plant can actually absorb and use. And this is also what's building topsoil. It's building in topsoil, you have fulvic and humic acids and aggregates, and so it's helping create this topsoil that is so important that we're losing. And so this is why bamboo, it's such a great opportunity for us to save our soil, to give our soil a rest, to rejuvenate our soil. And so these two mushrooms right here, well, actually the bottom, first I'll start with that bottom one. That's an Amanita. That's the destroying angel. So that's not a saprophyte. That's a Ectomycorrhizae. But the one next to it, that orange thing, it's a stinky squid stinkhorn. Stinkhorns definitely associate with bamboo because, in fact, that one was found in a bamboo grove. And then the one up top, that's a bamboo mushroom. And they have been cultivated in China for probably as long as they've been cultivating moso and in Japan. And so this mushroom is actually traded as a commodity, like a commodity crop. They're cultivating it. I've seen a video of it. It's fascinating. They're digging long trenches in the bamboo groves, and they're grinding up the excess plant material from the culms, the waste wood, and they're creating these long troughs, and they're inoculating the mycelium, the spawn, which is kind of like a seed, if you will, but and then it grows out, and then they harvest the mushrooms, they dry them, they eat them, they sell them, You can buy them on Amazon. It's pretty cool. Stinkhorns are weird looking, but they're awesome. Yeah. Yeah, stinkhorns.
Is that available in North America?
Certainly would be, yeah. I'm sure you could order it online. I mean, people should grow them too. I have some bamboo, I have some interesting, I should have put it on the slide, but in my Moso Grove, I have shiitake mushrooms growing on stumps of logs that I cut. So after I cut a tree, like I said, we built our house and our barn from wood on our property, and then we planted bamboo on the deforested land. And I inoculated the stumps with shiitake mushrooms. They're growing shiitake mushrooms 10 years later. And also a honey mushroom, or there's a few other types, but there's some other edible mushrooms that just happened. I didn't do it. Nature did it, and they're growing in the bamboo grove. One of my favorite mushrooms is edible wild mushrooms. It's called shrimp of the wood, and it looks like a little white puffball. But they're actually a mold that has taken over a different poisonous mushroom and turned it into an edible mushroom. It's crazy, but they're abundant in my bamboo. I've met another fella who's growing mushrooms under his bamboo grove as well. So there's a really cool opportunity there to stack functions, with like a permaculture design, stacking functions. And so yeah, think about growing bamboo or growing mushrooms under your bamboo grove.
I have a question, I'm sorry. But those are not native,
The bamboo mushroom is not, I don't think it's necessarily native to the US. However, there are other stinkhorn mushrooms, and shiitakes aren't native to the US either, but they're not going to cause, shiitakes have actually started being cultivated in the US, and they've escaped the farms. Almost like, I found shiitakes growing in the national forest on dead wood. Is it a bad thing? I don't think so. It's not hurting anything. So disease suppression is a big part of all of this. Why do this other than it's more profitable, it's going to be more resilient and everything. Disease suppression is what you get. You don't have to go buy that fungicide. You don't have to go buy that pesticide anymore, because in your system, in your regenerative system, it's taking care of itself. And you might see a little disease here and there, but ultimately, we can't eliminate disease. Think about what happens in the hospitals where we sanitize everything so much and it creates super bugs. There's a biofilm of highly toxic, or not toxic, but highly deadly staph infection. There's a biofilm in hospitals. We can't get rid of it, even with all the harsh chemicals. It's still there. You go to the hospital, you're more likely to get staph at the hospital than anywhere else. Similar in the field. If you have a barren agricultural field that's been tilled and tons of conventional synthetics being used on it all the time, because you've got think about the orange groves in Florida. They're all dying of greening, and nothing's helping. And but I do know what is helping. There's like a few small farms that are going regenerative, and they've just stopped using anything except for biological amendments, and their trees are coming back to life from the dead. I've seen it. So in a biological regenerative system, you're mimicking nature. The plants are in control of the system. They're feeding, they're farming the microbes. They're telling what microbes to grow based on the exudates that they're producing. They're like little factories in the soil and the roots. They're actually, breeding whatever microbe they need for whatever specific purpose they need at any given time. And that can change. It's very dynamic. And, but it's all about diversity. It's all about having diversity. And to start out with, we have to re-inoculate. So the farm, think of your farm as an ecosystem. We want to get away from the monoculture. So even, bamboo, it's hard not to have a bamboo monoculture, but again, just think, add some fungi to it, then you don't have a monoculture anymore. Or grow some wheat or clover or peas, or, even better, if you're starting out a bamboo farm, get as many different species in your cover crop mix as possible. 16, 20, get as many species, daikon, radish, you know, you name it. Like, there's so many great cover crop species, and you can get a mix and throw it out. And a lot of people think that their bamboo will get encroached, you know, that it might, you know, just mulch around your bamboo. Use wood mulch. I really recommend wood mulch, but yeah, to suppress the weeds right up on the baby bamboo plants. And if you have, if you're managing a mature grove, you're going to have, you know, we're harvesting 30% of the grove every year, so you're going to have some sunlight penetration. You have an opportunity to grow cover crops in a mature grove as well. So we want to get away from intensive management, but unfortunately, when it comes to farming, we are managing intensively regardless. So it's important to remember that, you know, we have to be stewards of the land, and we might have to add more mulch. We might have to add, you know, spray with biologicals every once in a while. But it's much better than the alternative where we're, you know, driving ourselves off of a cliff with all of these chemicals. We're dependent on them, and it's addictive because you see a short-term positive result, but I guarantee you can Google it. It's not sustainable. So we definitely are getting the benefit of disease suppression. That's the future of farming, disease suppressive farming.
Can I ask a question or kind of interject? I'm wondering,
Sure.
too, you know, like I live here in Louisiana, these kind of ideas are not proliferate here.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's almost like whatever we have here that's local here, the mycorrhizal structures, it's unstudied. So we don't even know what we have here. So
Yep.
when you say like throwing, you know, getting stinkhorn or something like that, there's probably stuff that's here that if you create the conditions.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And
Yes.
Instead of just reaching outside of your own natural habitat.
Yes.
Just, you know, using wood, like you said, natural wood mulch and just creating the conditions for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. He's saying that, you know, we should be using native resources because and you're absolutely correct. The best microbes that we could possibly use to team with our bamboo are going to be what is present in our natural environment already. Absolutely. And so I think that's in this slide right here, actually, bioamendments and compost. So we can make our own compost, and not all compost is made the same. We have to be aware of that. If you just go and buy compost from Home Depot or buy compost from the mulch yard, what you're getting often is reduced waste. It's different. It's not fully composted. We want to be using biologically rich compost from a producer that knows what they're doing, that is not just trying to reduce waste, but is trying to create a very robust product that is in line with this. But yeah, get it from close to home as possible, or at least from your biosphere. So we can look at, I should have put a picture of that in here, but we have, you know, biospheres. So if you're in Georgia or North Florida, you know, or South Carolina, you're still in the same biosphere. So we can use indigenous microorganisms. And so not all compost is equal. Some compost is actually toxic because it wasn't composted properly. And we need to be aware of that. So worm castings are excellent too. You've probably heard about black gold worm castings or biochar. These are all great things. Biochar needs to be done right. So this bottom image here was a study where they added 5, 10, 15% biochar, 20 and 25% biochar, or they didn't add any biochar to a worm bin when they're vermicomposting. And what happened is they determined that the 5 to 15% biochar is the range in which you want to be adding it to, you know, your soil or your potting mix or your worm castings. And there's been some really cool information on biochar where it could actually help replace for nurseries. They're putting it in a lot of these regenerative nursery, what is it called? Potting mixes as a replacement for peat moss, which is unsustainable. So a lot of nursery mixes use peat moss, and it helps retain water, but it's being harvested from the bogs in Canada, and it's not sustainable. We will run out of peat moss. They're also shredding pine bark and using that as a replacement for peat moss. That's good too, it works. But I really like biochar, and it's kind of like a coral reef. You may have heard of terra preta from the Amazon. There's evidence that the Amazonian indigenous people used char to add as a soil amendment and increase the biological activity of their soil, which would indicate that they were farming, they were farming actively in the jungles, and that you can take some of that terra preta and you can add it to soil that it doesn't exist, and you'll immediately have an increase in the biology. So biochar is very microporous, and it is like housing for the, housing for the microbes. And nematodes will go in and they'll lay dormant in the biochar, for example, or bacteria.
Could you grind up pine needles?
Grinding up pine needles.
Long leaf pine needles?
If I was going to use pine of any kind, I would make sure that it's been aged before I use it. So you almost want to compost it before you put it out in your field, because otherwise some of the resins and the sap and the, that needs to be kind of broken down, some of those polyphenols, those other plant compounds in the pine. Yeah, they need to be broken down first. But yes, you could use it. So aging wood chips in general, you want to use, you don't really ever want to put fresh wood chips out. But you certainly can. And they'll degrade over time. It might lock up a little bit of nitrogen at first, but only in the very sliver top surface of the soil. And let's see, what else here? So compost, there's my compost bins that I'm experimenting with using bamboo. So for example, taking the leaves of the bamboo and composting them, because hopefully I believe I would be getting, some of those free living nitrogen fixers and whatever else bacteria are living in and on the leaf surfaces and the stems of the bamboo. So I'm taking something biology from the very same plant that I want to treat. But yeah, compost is what you need as a replacement for all of that other stuff. Compost, really biologically rich compost. And we can test that. We can know, there's ways to know that what compost we're using is what we need. Yeah.
Your leaves look green in your compost. We have so much dead from the drought we've suffered. Will that be equally?
Sure. So if you're making compost, you want to use green. You have three components. You have high nitrogen. I use corn. I use cracked corn. You've heard of using animal manure. I don't really like messing with animal manure personally. But so you can use cracked corn. That's really high nitrogen. You can use brewer's waste. A lot of microbreweries, they have a byproduct that's the mash. You can go and get it, fill up buckets of it. So that's your high nitrogen component. You can, and then you need green material. So that's what you're seeing there. The green, I use grass clippings or bamboo. I use leaves from the trees. I try to get as much diversity of plant material as I can into my compost. For the green material, you need about like 35% green material, and then about 50% woody material. So you could use, that's where your dead bamboo leaves would come in, which would be great because those are going to have the fungi, the saprophytic fungi that are indigenous to your land in them, already decomposing them, which is going to be bred out in that compost. Yes.
another question. I guess we're getting into question and answer period.
It's okay. I love it.
So if I understood you correct, I heard you say that the bamboo ties up nitrogen in the leaves and the branches, essentially everywhere in the plant. Did I understand that right?
Yeah, there is nitrogen all throughout the plant. It's going to be the highest in the shoots, and but it's tying it up, not necessarily tying it up. Nitrogen is always cycling, and and nitrogen is stored in the tissues. Yes, it's also stored in the bodies of microorganisms. So the higher bacterial contents we have, the more nitrogen is released when those bacteria die and decompose. Every time you have flushes of bacteria that then, and then,
Having said that, is it a common practice or is it just beneficial to chip your bamboo, your old dead canes, break the leaves, and put that back into your grow?
Yeah, so when you chip old dead canes, you're adding carbon mostly. That's going to be the biggest nutrient you're adding. That's very carbon rich. The nitrogen is going to be in more green material. So the living green material, when you cut it and it's still fresh, or if you cut it fresh, like say alfalfa, and you bale alfalfa, and you know that it had root nodules, it's been fixing nitrogen. You bale it green or dry it when it was cut green, then even dried green material has a high nitrogen content, as long as you know that it was cut green and dried immediately. You can preserve the nitrogen levels at a high rate in dried material that way. But in terms of old, dead, broken down stuff, it's mostly going to be carbon. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on why you could have an aversion to animal manure.
Sure, animal manures, just because it's been difficult to harvest. Also, just the fact that you're more likely to accidentally obtain some sort of pathogen in your own body from handling manure or breathing in the dust. And in my experience, without access to a really large concentrated lot or something, it's just tedious. So
I also like to
messy.
point out that our human manure is a very valuable resource.
Absolutely.
Sort of thing, and
Yeah.
a lot of people get a really ick factor goes
Yeah.
on with that, but it's one of our big environmental issues that we have. And bamboo will basically eat anything, and it really likes food and pee.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Get to it as much as you can.
I've
actually designed some systems where human manure toilets are built inside of the standard bamboo.
Yeah.
So it automatically feeds it every time.
That's awesome.
And waters it as well with the liquid.
Yeah.
Just to think about that.
Yeah, certainly. People living off the grid or wanting to get back in touch with their primitive roots, you could definitely. I have 2 composting toilets on my property as well, and yeah, we compost the human manure, and I haven't necessarily used it yet because I haven't had a need to, but it's there, and yeah, certainly you can. It's good fertilizer once it's broken down. You definitely want to make sure it's broken down, and but one thing too about humans is that there's this product called milorganite, and I was like, oh, that could be an interesting fertilizer at one point. I was thinking because it's made of human manure from the sewage systems, but the problem is that humans, with all of our dirty diet, we actually have a lot of toxin, heavy metals, and things that end up in our waste systems. And so, but yeah, if you're on land and everyone's eating organically and and all that, and then yeah, you could totally use it. Urine as well could be used as a natural, cheap amendment. So, but all these things have to be handled any biohazard waste needs to be handled very carefully. It's definitely not something you would just want to go and mess around with if you don't read up on it and really know what's going on there. And again, that gets back to composting, and how we compost is very important. So thermophilic composting is what we're taught at the Soil Food Web School, because thermophilic composting is where you raise the temperature of the pile so hot above 132 for weeks, and you're flipping it when it gets too hot because you don't want it to catch on fire. It can actually catch on fire, but yeah, so you're maintaining a really hot temperature, and you're cycling every time you flip it. You're making sure that whatever was on the edges or the top of the pile is getting back into the hot center of the pile, because any temperature above 132 is going to actually kill pathogens. Most pathogens, if not all pathogens, human pathogens, cannot survive past that temperature. You've heard of pasteurization. So thermophilic composting will actually eliminate pathogens in your compost. But you can have up to 10%. You could go on to the next slide too, by the way. You can have up to 10% of what are considered disease-causing organisms in your soil without causing disease. They're there. That's what I was mentioning earlier about, we got to get away from this sanitization model. It's okay to have these organisms, and sometimes these pathogens actually become benign because you have enough consortium of beneficial organisms that they don't cause disease, even though they're there. But yeah, this is an interesting one here. Biocontrol agents, that's another part of the whole system that we're talking about, biologicals. Biocontrol agents, this is where they're definitely, big corporations are looking at, engineering microorganisms to make them more efficient as a biocontrol agent. But we can definitely use what's already available, like a couple of common ones. You may have heard of BT. That's been used for years, decades now. BT is a bacteria, Bacillus thuringiensis, and it's used to control like caterpillars or other vegetative loving insects that are going to eat your crop. But on a side note, healthy plants don't actually get attacked by insects. So that's a good indicator of how you're doing. If you have a lot of, they might take a bite, a nibble, munch on it here or there, but a healthy plant, healthy bamboo, healthy plants in general are going to be producing, phytochemicals that, there at the bottom, bamboo has a lot of phytochemicals, but all plants produce phytochemicals that will actually deter insects. So if you're getting your plants eaten in your garden, it's because something is imbalanced. So it's a bioindicator, but a biocontrol agent is something like BT, a bacteria that will infect some, and what's really interesting is that often in what has been observed by the Soil Food Web School scientists is that these organisms that act as biocontrol agents, they tend to prefer, for example, the disease-causing organisms like root knot nematodes. If you have root knot nematodes in your soil, the fungi that will trap and kill them and eat them are going to prefer the root knot nematodes over the beneficial nematodes. It's like they know. They have this intelligence. So you can actually train Bavaria bassania over here. This is the Agricultural Research USDA service, an image from the USDA, but there's a scientist in Florida who's doing a lot of this research on I would consider him one of the premier scientists on that front of entomopathogenic fungi. That means they are they go inside of they infect like a zombie. They infect these insects and mummify them. And you can actually train them in the lab to go after specific, insects that you want to target. So you can add Bavaria spores to your compost, for example. Or you could just get the spores and mix them up in a slurry and spray them on your plants. But we don't want to have to just, we don't want to get to the point where we're trying to ward off, these disease causers or these organisms that are eating our plants. We want to just cultivate from the very beginning a balanced system. There's another photo here, or an image of trichoderma and other plant. We have phytopathogens, and it's showing how trichoderma will actually help suppress disease and improve defense against pathogens. Trichoderma is it's a fungi that actually will eat other fungi. So it again specifically targets disease-causing fungi. Now it will eat any fungi, but if the disease causers are there, it's going to go after that. So if you need to use trichoderma, it's not something that you necessarily want to put out. I would go with the biologically active compost first before you go buying trichoderma products. That should be a last resort almost. Korean natural farming, you may have heard of that. I would encourage everyone to look into that as well. It's different than the soil food web system that they're teaching, but Korean natural farming was developed fairly recently, and it's all about fermenting plants and using indigenous microorganisms. There's a lot of research and anecdotal evidence out there about that, and you can figure out recipes. But guess what? Bamboo shoots are one of the most well-utilized plants for fermented plant juice. They use bamboo shoots all the time in Korean natural farming. And you can read more about that online and stuff. So it's really a lot out there, a lot more out there on biological farming than there used to be. It's becoming more mainstream. It's a movement, and I encourage everyone to hop on board. So back to the principles. Microbial diversity, biodiversity are always going to be what you're going for, what you need to be thinking about, keeping on your mind when you're farming, when you're growing plants, or even just your landscaping. And I got some photos of our Moso Grove early on, where you can see the cover crop. We had we had sorghum, peas, radish, white clover, all kinds of cover crop. And then around the bamboo plants, we had wood mulch in a kind of a donut shape to help with all kinds of things there, with suppressing weeds and from growing up next to the plants. And I mean, look at the difference between the NC A&T University Moso bamboo and our bamboo. You can see the green, the difference in the color, and that's a big indication of there's more nutrient cycling in this natural system. I would attribute part of it too to the fact that we planted in what was a forest, so there was a lot more biology already present in the forest soil. So pathogens, we talked about that. I want to encourage riparian buffer zones. Don't just clear everything off your land, and try to keep trees, if they're already on your land, you don't need to cut them down. If there's an island of trees, keep the trees. Plant in and around it. So applying the ecology, there's a photo of me using my rig. I've got a tank with compost tea in it. There's the compost tea I'm extracting in a bucket, and I'm spraying out the compost tea. It's diluted, but I'm getting those organisms on the plants. And those nursery plants had not had fertilizer since they came from the original nursery. The starts, they had it in the nursery mix, but after that was used up, we went totally biological. And I re-inoculated those plants multiple times, and they're doing great. And there's an example of some fungi growing in the mulch, some saprobe fungi. So that's what you want your mulch to look like right there. And it's going to increase organic matter, your CEC, and ultimately your fertility. Improving aggregate structure, that term aggregate structure, it's the soil structure itself is created by biology. And ultimately, we're going to reduce erosion by using these methods. Okay, next slide. So monitoring your microbes, your nose does know. You can actually smell and tell if it smells bad, it smells, you know, like alcohol, or it smells like poop, you know, or rancid. Those are all signs that our body has evolved to tell us, okay, there's something wrong. But that's not the only tool. You're not going to get by just with your nose. I really recommend microscopy. There's a guy, an agronomist, that came out to a Mimosa bamboo field and was looking at, we were looking at a disease on the plant and trying to determine what it was. And yeah, so microscope, shadow microscopy has come a long way, and we can definitely see a lot doing that. Genetic sequencing has come a long way. There's a company that I could recommend to you all, but it's expensive and it takes time. The microscopy is the quickest. There's a new company, Microbiometer, where you can measure the fungal bacterial ratio. Also, Brix meters are cool. They're pocket handheld Brix meters now, where you can juice your leaves and see the sugar levels. The higher sugar content, the healthier your plants. And that doesn't necessarily attract you know, pests just because there's sugar in the leaves. It's actually an indicator of really healthy plants. And again, organisms that eat plants will not go after healthy plants. They go after dying plants. And so anyways, let's move on to the next slide. This was a video I wanted to show you. This is an amoeba. It's huge. It's the biggest amoeba I've ever found. This is what bamboo, the soil of a mature bamboo grove looks like. Obviously, it's not representative of the whole, but you can see a strand of fungi there in the middle. That the amoeba must have eaten it, but this is a huge amoeba. This is at 400x. This amoeba it's huge. It's crazy. But I wish I could show you the video, but it's not loading. Anyways, I think I'm running out of time. Gotta hurry it up. So. I've been looking at 40-year-old bamboo grove, the soil, monitoring the microbiology. It's very interesting to see kind of where it's at. And what I can tell you from the results is that it had a higher fungal biomass ratio and more diversity as compared to the soil of a forest right adjacent to it. So the bamboo growing into that forest, the forest is older than the bamboo, and the bamboo had a higher it had more diverse and higher levels of these organisms, these beneficial organisms. What does that say about bamboo in terms of remediating soil? All right, next slide, please. It also had increased I checked the compaction level, and it was decreasing the compaction of the soil. Soil Food Web lab techs are all over the states. I am also one of them. If you want to send samples, but you can find Soil Food Web scientists all over. These are the lab techs. Just go to Soil Food Web School website, and you can find laboratory technicians who are certified to use a standardized method to assess your compost or your soil and tell you where you're at and where you need to get. And these are some of the names. Take photos of that. I watch YouTubes of these people all the time. They're incredible, dropping knowledge bombs right and left. So. And yeah, Dr. Elaine, Peter McCoy is awesome. Johnson Su with the Johnson Su bioreactor. That's another method of making compost if you want to look into an easier, more passive composting system. But you really don't want to just be like throwing stuff into a compost pile and forgetting about it. It's not going to work. It's not that easy, unfortunately. But it's not hard either. You just gotta do it right, or find somebody that's making it. So, are we ready to go to the next one? Okay. So some case studies, really quick. Haiku Bamboo Nursery never uses synthetic fertilizer. These Hmong, Vietnamese, Laos Asians, farmers all throughout North Carolina. There's a lot of them. They all planted bamboo. This guy on the bottom right, I had the pleasure of visiting his grove. He actually planted into a forest because bamboo associates really well with the forest microbes. And then once the bamboo matured in that shade where it's less stressful for the plant, they kill the trees. And then the canopy dies and the bamboo grows. So Juan Pablo in Guatemala, he's got a nursery there. He's not using synthetic fertilizers. He has really great success there. He's making compost. We got Dern and Becky of Big Heart Bamboo and Bamboo Australia. Their nursery is all organic, natural, regenerative. I think all she's using is a little bit of rock dust, but yeah, it's totally possible. There's people doing it. You don't need the fertilizers. You don't need all the chemicals. So next slide, please. And here's Shanti, who's here with us today. She was very generous and gave me this awesome image here of kind of the summarizing growing bamboo regeneratively. So these are the principles you really want to follow in a nutshell. And deep mulch, fungal mulch, plant or animal inputs, and inoculating using compost. It's simple. Okay. And here was a really interesting study where they used bamboo vermicompost. So they fed the worms bamboo powder, and they used that compost, they extracted it, and they used it to treat seedlings. And the seedlings that were treated with the compost did the best. They had more disease, or they had less damping off, which is a huge problem in agricultural nursery settings. Damping off is caused by a couple of microbes, Pythium rhizoctonia, and so yes, compost extract sprayed on your nursery plants will help prevent loss. Okay. And then here's a really interesting study where they were looking at a Moso bamboo grove in China. They found this rhizome that was full of shoots. They analyzed it and they found that it was indeed more rich in biology. So when we they're studying that to figure out, okay, how could we harness that and improve the shooting in our bamboo? So, but again, it goes back to just trust nature, use biologically rich compost from your area. Maybe if we can have bamboo as an input to that compost, we can enhance it even more. But all of these enhancements come with using regenerative biological farming. Soil health is improved. We can actually reverse climate change in a couple of years. There are scientists that have run those numbers and mapped that out. And we can actually draw down carbon into the soil. Actually, a big driver of climate change is carbon being released from tilling. And people are, a lot of the mainstream just thinks, oh, there's nothing we can do about that because we have to grow food to feed people. Well, it's doable. We can grow better food. We can grow more food with regenerative. So challenges, and I think we're almost close to the end here. Challenges in biological farming, it's very complex. There's a changing climate. We don't really know how that's going to affect things. And we're dependent on chemicals. So I encourage all of you to, look at yourselves, look at how, start thinking about that, how dependent we are. And, understanding that we're dependent is the first step to getting away from that dependence, because it's really easy to want to just go buy a bottle and put it out. So, all right, in conclusion, regenerative is the way, biological, it's a biological system, it's complex. We need to be, if I could tell you one thing, get away from the chemicals. Even some of the organic fertilizers are salt-based and will destroy your mycorrhizal fungi. And especially get away from the herbicides and pesticides. They're destroying our own microbiome as well. That's why there's a lot more cancer rates in children, a lot more autism. All these things are correlated and soon to be proven as causes of the chemical exposure. So we want nature-based solutions. And don't guess. Link up with with someone who can test for you if you can't test yourself. So let's all be healthy and we can save the planet with bamboo and microbes.
Thank you ever so much, Everest. No
Absolutely.
longer to be called Everest Holmes, but Professor Holmes.